Hello, everyone. Hi, Professor Violeta. How are you?
How are you? All good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you, Professor. And very nice to having you here today for our Ai-Mast 2021. So, welcome everyone, and welcome to the first plenary session of Ai-Mast 2021. And I wish you thank you so much for following and participating in this conference since this morning. Okay, today we have. Before that, I'm Dr. Jagan from Faculty of Maritime Studies of UMT, and I will be the chairperson of this session. Today, we have a prominent speaker from Sweden, Professor Violeta Roso, and she will be in our session for the past half an hour. And before that, let me introduce our speaker today. She is Professor Violeta Roso from the Department of Technology Management and Economics, Division of Service Management and Logistics, Chalmers University of Technology, Sweden. She obtained her first degree in 1996 in naval architecture and her master's degree in 2002 in management of logistics and transportation, and her PhD in management of logistics and economics, Chalmers University. And she has a very extensive work history and experience. First of all, in 2015, she is an associate professor, and until now, she's an associate professor at Division of Logistics and Transportation. And also, she is a director of doctoral studies at Department of Technology, Management and Economics of Chalmers University of Technology. And from 2012 until 2015, she is a senior lecturer, assistant professor at Division of Logistics and Transportation in Chalmers University of Technology, Sweden. She has a very extensive visiting academic positions, including in North Florida, New South Wales, and Australia. And also, she has been a key person for reviewing some substantial journal in maritime logistics, including research, Journal of Transportation and Business Management, and so she is the key person of dry port in the world. So she has very extensive, and she's a pioneer of the dry port, and even she's my mentor as well. Today, Professor Violeta Roso will present a paper entitled "Dry Ports for Functional Seaport Inland Access." Okay, so Professor Violeta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jagan. Thank you. Now, I'd like to share my slides, if the host lets me. Sharing, unfortunately, not working. I can try like this, and you tell me if it's working for your part. Can you see now my slides?
I'm afraid not yet, Professor. Okay.
Now.
Can you share the slide now?
It says that I'm sharing.
All right.
Already, I'm not sure. Can you?
All right.
Oh, it's very delayed, I see.
Okay. Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay. Thank you. You see, these days with the technique, still some issues we have. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here to share this knowledge of dry ports and research that I have done so far. Just to tell you that not so long ago, I have done exactly the same on the other part of the world in Colombia. So I hope you will enjoy it as they have. So the title of today's presentation, Dry Port Concept for Sustainable Seaport Inland Access. And why to talk about dry ports at all? Now I have lost you, sorry. Jagan,
Yeah.
can you see my next slide? Because I don't
Yeah.
see anything.
Yeah. I can. We can see that, Prof.
Okay, good. So I'll speak. If something like looks strange, please just tell me. It seems like it's a delayed.
All right. All right.
Okay, so the background why to do the research on dry port was the fact that demand for and trade is increasing, and then of course demand for containerized transport is increasing. As you can see on this slide, how the size of the vessels has increased through the decades. So improvements to meet that demand for increased containerized transport has been done on this maritime side of the transport chain. So we have a bigger boats. These bigger boats, we also have to be handled with a bigger cranes. So seaports acquiring bigger equipment to meet that demand. They are dredging their drafts. So all the improvements are done on that part of the maritime transport chain. However, increase at the sea flow generates almost proportional increase in the inland flow, which means the arrival of these big vessels that of today can reach more than 20,000 TEUs can generate certain problems at the seaport and seaport inland access. If you are all aware what's happening now on the east coast of the US and the vessels piling up to deliver or pick up the containers. So basically without the good seaport inland access, it will be a chaos. So what we need to meet this demand is functional seaport inland access so that we don't have thousands and thousands of trucks to pick up those containers. So the basic idea behind the dry port concept is that it is inland intermodal terminal directly connected to seaport by rail where customers can meet or collect their standardized units as if directly at the seaport. So what I'm trying to say with this definition that I created long ago is that the functionality has to be reached with dry port main functions like intermodal terminals, so it has to handle intermodal loading units for smooth transshipments. It has to have a high capacity transport mode between the seaport and a dry port. And it should offer services that are usually available at the seaport, like different kind of value-added services like customs clearance, maintenance of containers, and so on. So the basic idea is shown in this figure that shows actually that the dry port concept interface as the one that customer perceives compared to the regular transportation done by road from a seaport when you have multiple stops in a system. So what are the potential benefits that result from a dry port? I really have to emphasize this word potential because it really depends very much on where the dry port is implemented for what kind of a seaport, in which countries, in which geographic region, and so on. So some dry ports may tick all of these boxes of these benefits, while some dry ports may just fill up one or two, depending also who is implementing a dry port, which actor of the transport system. So just to go through these potential benefits and how they can be created with dry ports. So with the implementation of a high capacity transport mode, then there is of course potential to increase seaport capacity. You might wonder why and how. The fact that we move the containers from the vessels to the train and out to a dry port so that we free the operational space at the seaports, leave this space, more space at the seaports, and most of the seaports today have issues with lack of space. While the operational space is free at the seaport, we can also increase the seaport productivity because bigger container vessels may call at the seaport. Altogether also reduces congestion at seaports in seaport cities because the containers are moved by rail to inland destinations, so there are no trucks piling up and queuing at the gates. And for example, in Sweden, which all countries have different rules, so in Sweden about 40 containers can be substituted, 40 lorries can be substituted with one train. So basically with one train we have 40 lorries less on the road. While in US, it's much, much longer. They have rails that are allowed to be long up to 3 kilometers. So there's even bigger advantage by replacing or substituting trucks by rail. Altogether reduces the risk for road accidents because we have a lot less trucks on the roads. And of course, you are all aware of the truck driver shortage these days, so it even actually contributes to this concept even more because we wouldn't need that many truck drivers out there. Altogether lowers also environmental impact. At least in some parts of the world, most of the rail is electrified. Like, for example, in Sweden, it's 95% of all rail that is electrified. So one truck, one rail, one train, 40 trucks less, trucks that are usually diesel driven, so it's very obvious lower environmental impact. Dry port may also serve as a depot or empty container storage, depending how convenient it's situated from a seaport, and it's usually much cheaper to store the containers at the dry port than at the seaport. It also improves the seaport access to the areas outside its traditional hinterland. So I will show you examples later on different dry ports that I have studied around the world and how these potential benefits have been realized of those dry ports. So basically this improvement of the access outside seaport's traditional hinterland brings a new competitive advantage to seaport, attracts new customers to the seaport. And also it might support regional development. Once the region has a good logistics solution, it attracts the industries in the areas. We have nice examples of that in Sweden. And with that also comes improved customer service inland because of all the logistics solutions being available closer to the customer, final customer. So this table just show like a summary of different types of dry ports, whether they are situated close, mid-range, or distant from a seaport, and what kind of benefits they might generate for different actors of a transport system. We all might wonder, okay, what's the benefit for road operators? They would just lose market share. But there are certain countries around the world where long trailers are not allowed to pass through the city centers. And of course, then it's very convenient for road operators as well to deliver their goods. Sorry for this, this is really inconvenient now. To deliver their goods directly to a dry port instead to seaports. In Australia, for example, long trailers are not allowed to pass through city centers. For what drivers have to do, truck drivers have to park somewhere outside the city center, take one by one container to deliver to seaport, and then go back to pick up the other one, and so you can imagine how much traffic that all generates together. So having a dry port, closed dry port on the outskirts of the city would be very beneficial for road operators as well. Now I'm talking so much about dry ports, but it all started long ago with the idea how dry ports may generate huge environmental benefits for different actors in the transport system. And since I started that research, as Jagan mentioned, it's really skyrocketed the publications related to the concept. And my perception that this is that environmental perspective to the concept that brought that huge attention to it. When I started, basically there were 2 publications on dry port, just mentioning what that might be. And now if you go Google dry port, you can find like hundreds of publications where we contributed, both of us, very much. And this study that we have done 2 years ago showed, like, from 2007 to 2019, how the publications increased from 2 to 202. But this was done just in a Science Direct and Scopus database. So we just took 2 limited databases, but basically publications are much, much higher. Here is a link in case you would like to check that. And speaking about the different and many publications, then comes also the discussion on the definitions, but as well as different taxonomies and the classification of dry ports. So in some parts of the world, dry ports are referred to as inland ports, some are metro ports, or extended gates and so on. So there are different notions and of course different classification criteria, sometimes depending on the distance from the seaport, sometimes on the type of the development, whether they were developed by an inland actor or a seaport, whether they are in a pre-phase or a growth phase and so on. So very many different types of dry ports that might be studied out there. Speaking about the directional development, that type of a dry port development is very interesting because there are different cases, or very obvious cases, of whether a dry port is implemented by inside out or outside in model. So what are these models? Inside out is a model that's of a directional development of a dry port where a dry port is initiated by inland actor of the transport system, like a municipality or a transport operator or rail operator. And that one is usually meant to either boost the regional development or attract the industries in the area. While the other one, which is called outside in, that's usually implemented by a seaport or a shipping line, and that one is usually for their benefits, either to solve the lack of space at the seaports, to bring competitive advantage and so on. So quite different models generate different benefits for different actors of the systems. However, this directional development are basically very characteristic for a startup phase, because what we have noticed with our research is basically that after some time that development tends to be very bidirectional, because there has to be a very tight collaboration between the actor who initiated the dry port and the seaport. Without that good collaboration, there is no success of a dry port. So in the growth phase, it tends to be very bidirectional. One study that I have done long ago and that I think that kicked this interest was this environmental evaluation of a dry port, where I have done a model with a reference situation where a dry port, whereas in a transport system for a port of Gothenburg, where most of the containers were moved by road to inland destination. And then I have created a scenario where a dry port would be situated, so hypothetical dry port, that would be situated like 80 kilometers from a seaport. So the goods would be moved by train from a port of Gothenburg to that dry port, and then shorter legs by road. And that study has resulted in, I have simulated, of course, and that study showed that, of course, the queues at the terminals dropped drastically in the model with the dry port. So the B1, as you see, is a model where the dry port was in a system. And in that model, we had only 5 trucks queuing at the gates, while in the model without the dry port, there were 23 trucks queuing, 85 minutes average time of the queue for those trucks. So it's a lot less or significantly reduced queuing at the gates. So for some of you, might not seem long to queue 85 minutes. For truck drivers, it can be very annoying. And to reach their destination in time, to deliver their containers in time, they might speed up, they might avoid regular rest, and that altogether increases the risk for road accidents. And that's something that we really don't want to have. Then another evaluation at the same study that has done for CO2 emissions showed, as I told you before, one train can substitute about 35 to 40 lorries or trucks in Sweden. So that simulation was done for 35 trucks. So the model with the dry port generated 25% less emissions than the model without the dry port. And this is not only from driving, which would be very obvious and easy to calculate. So not just the driving distance that was replaced from a seaport to a dry port, it was also include queuing at the seaport gates and in the seaport cities, so at the congested roads. So if we translate this to road kilometers reduced, it would be about 2,000 road kilometers a day. But just please keep in mind that this modeling with that hypothetical dry port has been done for a dry port which was just 80 kilometers distant from the seaport. if we would have a distant dry port with few hundred kilometers, the benefits would be much higher. So I told you before how I have done research all around the world, visited seaports from one part of the world to another. Here you can see from Australia, Singapore, New Zealand, Jackson, US, and in the middle, I have put this Alameda Corridor team picture because I was very impressed by Alameda Corridor in connecting the LA and Long Beach seaports with their hinterland. So I'll just tell you a bit more on the next slide, but that one is kind of most impressive first type of a dry port, closed dry port I encountered. So closed dry port that would be situated on the outskirts on the city on the short distance from a seaport. So usually it's not viable for a rail to cover such a short distance, but we speak now about high volumes and high frequencies like Alameda Corridor, for example, which will be like very much in use now because of all that congestion with the vessels piling up at the seaports, Long Beach and LA. So basically, Alameda Corridor, it's quite famous project that started in '97 and then realized quite far, in short time it was operational when they built a trench connecting the seaports with the hinterland. So basically, 10 miles long trench, like that's digged, so you don't see from the road, you don't see that train. You have basically to lean on to see the train, and then with that trench and with that great solution, they just avoided all the crossings with the rail and the passengers going on. So very good example of a 20-mile long distance connecting gate inland port and the port of LA and Long Beach. Another very good example of very close dry port, but as you see, they don't call these facilities always dry port all around the world. Was one of my first cases that I covered and visited Enfield in Sydney, Australia. Enfield intermodal facility that's not even 20 kilometers far from seaport, from Port Botany. That one is very interesting because already in '97, so '97, Port of Sydney had huge congestion issues, and they were eager to build their own closed dry port at Enfield area, very close to, because most of the goods are destined to the metropolitan area of Sydney. And there were many obstacles towards that implementation because solving the problem, environmental issues at the seaport and the city, central city, was translated into creation of environmental issues around the Enfield area. So there were many obstacles, but eventually, just 2 years ago, it started to operate and is operational. So it took more than 20 years, despite heavy congestion at the seaport, to implement this dry port to solve the congestion issue and to increase the seaport productivity. This is a typical example of outside in, where a seaport strives to solve the lack of space and congestion issue and builds its own dry port. And then we have one in which I was very involved in, Skaraborg dry port in Sweden. You see, this one is still in development. They're just building around terminals. There are rail sidings and it's operating. But what's very interesting is in this one was that the municipality of Skaraborg wanted to open a dry port to basically boost the regional development and to attract the industries in the area. It didn't go very well at the beginning because of the poor management of a dry port, but eventually a big retailer, it's called Jula, it's like a Walmart in Sweden. They saw the potential in running and moving their containers from the nearby warehouse to the port of Gothenburg by train instead of trucks, and then it all happened. Like, they bought the dry port, they acquired the trains, they started to run it. So it's one of the very first and early examples of how a big customer sees the potential in having a dry port in a system and running their own dry port and operating it. So now they released it and someone else operates, but all started like that. Now to move to mid-range dry port, which should be situated about the distance that's usually covered by road, but we speak about high frequencies here and the bigger volumes. One of my absolute favorite examples that shows how it brings a huge competitive advantage for a seaport is this Metroport for Port of Tauranga in New Zealand. It's so interesting because before Port of Tauranga implemented its Metroport in Auckland industrial area, Auckland Seaport was the biggest container port in New Zealand. However, Auckland Seaport was heavily congested because all the truck drivers had to pass through the city center to reach the seaport. And due to that congestion, it caused delays. So Port of Tauranga, which you see how it's situated south of Auckland, Port of Tauranga saw the potential of having their own dry port in Auckland industrial area. So they implemented their dry port, or as they call it, the Metroport, which is just 220 kilometers from Seaport Tauranga. And by offering good rail services supported by excellent IT system for tracking and tracing, they have actually gained that competitive advantage, and they turn to stall basically the customers from Seaport of Auckland. So this is a very good example how good logistics solution attract the actors of the transport system industries, as well as truck drivers who realize that it's easier for them to move the goods from this industrial area to this dry port and then on the rail to move on further to Port of Tauranga. Exactly one of my favorite examples of bringing the competitive advantage for certain seaport. What Seaport of Auckland tried to do the same. They wanted to fight this and they built their own dry port nearby, but it didn't work very well. Once you lose your customers, it's very hard to gain them back. Another example of mid-range is Virginia Inland Port in US, also example of outside in, how seaports tried to creates better competitive advantage or increase the space is this one. However, this one did not succeeded as planned because they initially planned to have 100,000 TEUs to handle at that dry port, but still have not reached that because in US it's very much once the container is on the truck, it stays on the truck. Transshipments are not very in favor over there. And then distant one, two good examples of distant dry ports that we have in Coslada, Spain. This one is very specific because this one works as a dry port for many seaports. Depending on a trade going on in the world, that's how this dry port changes the role. Sometimes it's a dry port for Barcelona seaport, sometimes for Bilbao, all depending on a train. But this one is very interesting because they stated that they obtained the dry port status in 2003, although they operated since 2000. So when I asked them, I visited, of course, this one as well, asked them how, they say we started to offer extra value-added services like customs clearance and so on. So we think we gained the dry port status. That's the only example of a facility like that claiming clearly that they are a dry port with that status of a dry port concept. And another one in Sweden, which I really want to share with you. This one is excellent example of boosting a regional development in a region that it was not well developed, but all kicked it off when a dry port was implemented. All started with negotiations with one big customer, like Hennes and Mauritz, H&M. They said, if you build a good logistics solution in this area, we will bring our distribution center into this area. So they have done it. And since then, it boosted, like skyrocketed the regional development. Now, even Swedish Amazon has established in the area, and they're using this dry port and all the services available at the dry port. So excellent example of boosting a regional development at the dry port. I see that the time has run out. Just quick summary in a minute of these seaports that I have studied in the east coast of US, just to show you how involvement of development of seaport inland access differs very much on what type of a seaport we are speaking of or dealing with, and how all of these seaports on the east coast of US have prepared for the extension of Panama Canal, so the bigger vessels that would call at the seaport. So the result was just that Savannah and Charleston, which are operating seaports, while those others, Miami, Everglades, and Jacksonville, are landlord seaports and mostly involved in cruising business. They were not so much involved in seaport inland access, the implementation of their own inland ports, as they call there, or dry ports, while Savannah and Charleston both were very much involved in implementing the dry ports. They both have well operating one dry port, and now they were encouraged by the success of their existing dry ports, so they are implementing another one in other areas to boost the volumes to the seaport. And you see these two are the biggest by far compared to the others. And just a conclusion, because there are also examples of failures of dry port, which I don't want anyone to happen. So what has to be done before one reaches towards implementation of a dry port, to see the complex system, whole system, and the infrastructure, supporting infrastructure in the region and the country we are talking about to implement the dry port, so that it all is in place and the actors are willing to collaborate, because that's actually the only way to succeed with the dry port implementation. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Violeta Roso. It was very intense and very interesting presentation. So from what I can see here, dry ports normally have playing a major role from the various perspective, especially on regional development, environmental protection, seaport competitiveness. So they are key. They are playing a major, substantial role in the maritime logistics itself. But unfortunately, Professor, some of the region they refuse. They refuse to collaborate with dry ports by saying that dry port is just a small node in the logistics center. So we can see that some of the, especially on seaports, they are not really concerned about the emergence of dry ports in the logistic platform. So what is your my question to you? What will be your view, on the seaports that refusing to collaborate with dry ports, saying that they are still infant or small?
Yes, I have encountered those kinds of seaports and dry ports, and basically it's hard to force anyone, since dry ports are huge. I mean, huge. It's all compared to seaports are not huge, but still those are huge financial investments to have a dry port. I still think that some policies have to be in place in order to boost this. First of all, intermodal transport. In Europe, it's very much towards the increase in intermodal transport. So there are benefits directly connected to these, and there are strategies from different seaports having that green image, which is very important. Of course, in different parts of the world, this green image might be less important, but by green image, that's something that drives and attracts customers. So I think that it's very much also up to the customers itself what they demand from certain seaports. We see that it's increasing, demand on seaports is increasing, more of having a dry ports in the system or functional seaport inland access, because it's not anymore only on the rates at the seaport, which seaport is cheaper than the other, but it's also how well the goods will be moved to the final customer once from a seaport. So I think that usually when a seaport see the problem or encounter the problem, they start to act towards those improvements.
Yeah,
And
that's very clear.
sometimes there's even competition between seaports and the dry ports. I have those cases as well, because seaports have their own agenda of how to move those goods from a seaport's inland. So they didn't want a competitor of like a dry port to steal the goods, so to speak. So there was no collaboration.
Yeah, so that's why, Professor. So I really agree with that, because dry ports, they are more flexible. They are more flexible. They can assist seaport in any way, and on the other hand, seaports, they are more rigid. They have their own policy and they have their own strategy on how to move. On the other hand, the dry ports are very, we cannot say they are small, but they are very active. They are very active node in the intermodal transport. So I really thanks for your sharing, and also one last question for you. We believe nowadays we are keep talking about the industrial revolution. We keep talking about IR 4.0. Everything should be go along IR 4.0. So from your view or from your research, do you think that dry ports are willing to accept the changes in this fourth industrial revolution?
I think we'll have to all, even dry ports. As I mentioned only maybe on 2 examples, how all the most successful dry ports claim the success also to very good IT system that they use. So we are going to that direction. Without that, we are not going to progress.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor, for your
Thank you for having me.
insights, for your ideas, and for your views. We really appreciate that. And once again, I would like to thank Professor Roso for your time and for your insight and also for your opinion. And I look forward a fruitful, productive exchange in future and hope our collaboration with Sweden University and UMT will continue and hope it will create a new spark in our research. And thank you so much, Professor, and have a nice day. And thank you for joining us for today.
Thank you for having me. I really look forward collaboration.
Thank you then. Take care and
Bye.
stay safe.
Bye.
Can we take a photo, Professor? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you, Professor. Have a pleasant day and stay safe.
Thank you too. Bye.